As a business with an amazing product or service, it doesn't matter how good that product or service is. You need to create awareness around your brand and offering. Once you have this awareness, you then need to convince people to purchase your product or service, and, more importantly, to spend their hard-earned money investing in what you are offering them. You then need to find a way to keep them coming back and to keep them spending their money with you versus one of your competitors. So how exactly do we do this? Well, through marketing, of course. In this course, we are going to teach you how to promote your product or service through social media marketing and to keep them coming back for more. Welcome to your professional diploma in social media marketing. This is an introduction to marketing. Some of the objectives of this lesson will be to define what marketing is, as well as explain how social media marketing fits into marketing. We're going to learn to understand the social media life cycle, and we're going to be listing some social media marketing trends, which you can start using immediately. But let's first take a look at what marketing is. So before we can understand what social media marketing is, we have to have a general understanding of what marketing is first. So what exactly is marketing? Well, marketing can be defined as the promotion of a product or service through various activities. Now, of course, this is an extremely broad definition, so I thought that we'd look at some Cambridge dictionary definitions for marketing, as they include some really accurate ways of describing what marketing is. And specifically for me, I think that, I really want to focus on some of these definitions, as it gives you a really good idea of what you want to achieve through your social media marketing. So the first definition is that it is a job that involves encouraging people to buy a product or service. It can also be defined as the work of advertising and offering goods and services for sale. And I think the last definition, which for me is one of the most important definitions, is the business activity that involves finding out what customers want, using that information to design products and services, and then selling them effectively. Now, this was really the original driving force behind the rise of marketing as an industry, was to find out what customers wanted, use that information to design products and services, and then sell them effectively. And we're quickly going to have a look at the history of marketing in a little bit, just to understand how this is so important and how this fits in, right? But first, I just want to highlight some of the most important things. So first of all, in these definitions, you're looking at the first definition, which is to buy a product or service, right? The ultimate goal is to get someone to buy your product or service. The second one that I want to highlight is the offering goods and services for sale. So you are offering something ultimately that is for sale, that someone can purchase and buy. And again, with the aim to drive the sales. But the most important aspect of this is the third point, which is design products and services and selling them effectively, right? And based on what customers want. There's no point in having a product that the customer doesn't want. Now, I know that this sounds a lot like sales, right? I think that the main key takeaway here is that we're trying to sell something. So how is this different from sales? Isn't that just sales? Well, let's look at the difference between marketing and sales. So first of all, marketing is generating interest in the goods and services that are being sold, while sales are the activities that actually convert the prospect into a buyer of those goods and services. So we can see the link here, and we can see how both marketing and sales really, really need to work together in order to streamline both messaging, targeting tactics, as well as sharing knowledge. Remember that salespeople have direct contact with the end user of the product or service that you are trying to generate interest in. So while marketing has data on those potential customers to target, sales actually has the knowledge of what the customer wants. And remember, that is one of the most important things to keep in mind, is what your customer wants throughout your entire marketing journey. So did you know that the global marketing industry is worth $1.7 trillion worldwide. I mean, that is worth a lot, right? And I think that we need to say, well, if this is as big as the industry is, how did it actually get this big? And I want to just look at a little bit of the history behind marketing and how it originated. It's believed that early traders used a form of marketing by the way that they presented their goods on display tables at markets. So while this is not technically considered marketing, the original idea was there, right? You can imagine that in a market, you probably have someone that is selling the same wares as you, and out of all your other competitor stores, you need to make your store look good and want to attract passers-by, right? You want to catch their interest. And you do so by catching their attention with beautiful displays. And you can kind of see how this is starting to translate into marketing, right? With your marketing, you want to catch the attention of your users, no matter what platform you're using, and you want to ensure that they take an interest, right? And so that's kind of, the start of what we'd consider early day marketing. But it was really during the later part of the Industrial Revolution that modern era marketing really started to rise, right? And this is because of the number of factories and increased output of consumer products. Purchasing goods was becoming easier for consumers, and as infrastructure and transportation and mass media began to take hold, it created a need for the producers of goods to find a more sophisticated way of informing consumers about their products, as well as working out what products to create in order to meet the need of consumers. And again, this is where that third definition that we looked at from the Cambridge Dictionary comes in, right? So here they were looking at what needed to be created to meet the needs of consumers. And it shouldn't be any different today, right? What does your customer want from the product that you are selling or from the service that you are offering? So we can see how this is not unlike today. The basic concept has not changed since then. It's just the methodology that we use. So with the advent and rise of the internet, marketing has completely evolved into a very complex matrix of activities that aim to attract, inform, entertain, and retain potential customers. So now that we know a little bit of history about marketing, let's look at the types of marketing that we get. So when we look at marketing, it can be broken down into two main types of marketing. We have traditional marketing, and this is essentially the pre-internet era of marketing. And then we have digital marketing, which is essentially the post-internet era of marketing. So anything that is offline is essentially traditional, and anything that is online is essentially digital. So some examples of traditional and digital marketing. We have traditional marketing, which is things like print media, telephone, broadcast, and outdoor. And then we have digital marketing, which would look at content marketing, email marketing, search engine optimization or SEO, and search engine marketing. And of course, social media marketing would fit into the digital marketing category. Before we jump into more information on this, let's quickly look at some marketing jargon. So search engine optimization. This is something we are going to learn more about, but ultimately it is the process of increasing the quantity and quality of organic traffic to a website. And if you don't know what organic means, we are going to jump into it, but ultimately it is something that is unpaid. So you do not pay for that marketing or that traffic to a site. And then we have search engine marketing, which is the process of increasing a website's visibility in search engine results pages, primarily through paid advertising. So again, this is all paid means of generating traffic to your website. If it doesn't make too much sense right now, don't worry about it. We are going to go into it a little bit later in this course. But let's jump back into the traditional versus digital marketing. So there are some key differences between traditional and digital marketing. Of course, In a modern day, you want to use an omni-channel approach, and this means using multiple social media channels. In this day and age, you want to be using an omni-channel approach to your marketing. So you want to be using multiple different platforms as well as forms of marketing. And this is why we need to learn about it. But you also need to know what the benefits of each one is and align that with what your strategy is. So if we want to look at traditional, we need to keep in mind that traditional marketing allows for a very specific location, right? If you think about a billboard is in one place. So you're not going to be targeting a global audience. It does tend to also incur high costs because you have to then pay for the design. You might have to outsource the work, and you may have to pay for someone to put that billboard up, for example, as well as renting that space. So generally, traditional marketing can incur higher costs than digital, for example. It also restricts two-way communication and allows for mostly only one-way communication. Of course, there are ways in which people can contact you regarding your billboard, for example, through phone or email, but you cannot get feedback on how people are responding to that specific advert. And then it also has minimal flexibility. So if you make a mistake on your billboard, it is not going to be cheap to replace that billboard. So you cannot directly make changes. It's going to be a whole process in order for you to make changes. And then it's also difficult to measure the return on investment. Now, of course, there are ways of doing this. However, it's not as easy when you look at it versus digital. So on the other end of the scale, we have digital, which generally allows you to target a global audience. You can break your audiences down and target very specific niche audiences. It also has a lower cost. You generally can create your own content. You can post yourself, and it also lends itself to two-way communication, right? You can see the comments on adverts or on posts. So it allows you to be able to see what people are actually saying about the content that you are posting. It also allows for maximum flexibility. You can make changes to your advert directly and have it implemented immediately. We wouldn't suggest changing your adverts too often, because you need to be able to get enough data to see how your audience is responding. But if there's a mistake, for example, on one of your ads, you can easily go and change it, and that will be implemented immediately. And then it is also very easy to measure your return on investment, or ROI. And here you can see how much you've spent and what kind of return you've gotten on what you've spent. So let's quickly look at return on investment. Return on investment is essentially the ratio between net profit and the cost of investment, right? So how much you've spent on an advert and how much you've gotten back in return for that spend. We will look at that a little bit later. But traditional and digital marketing can be further broken down into organic marketing, which we mentioned previously. So this is any marketing that you do not pay for. You create the content, such as a blog, you post it to your website. Of course, obviously you've probably paid someone to, create that content. Maybe you've got a writer. Alternatively, you've written the content yourself, you've posted it. So it doesn't really cost you anything, but you don't pay to get that content out there. So you've created this blog and then you've gone and shared it onto multiple platforms. People have seen it, they've responded, they've shared, whatever the case is. And that is organic content. So you haven't really paid for anything to put that content out there. And then you have paid marketing. And this is any content that you do pay for. So you put an advert up, you pay $100 for it to run for a week, and you see what kind of engagement you get back from it. And that gets put into the people that you target. Now that we've learned a little bit about traditional marketing and digital marketing, I think that we need to delve a little bit further into digital marketing, as that lends itself more to social media marketing. So let's take a look at what digital marketing is. So digital marketing is also known as online marketing, and it's ultimately the promotion of products and services using the internet. As well as any other kinds of digital technology that you can use for marketing purposes. So that would be computers, mobile phones, online platforms, as well as other digital media types. Some of the digital marketing media types that we get are owned media, and this comprises of digital marketing channels that a company exercises complete control over. Then we have paid media, and this refers to external marketing efforts that involve a paid placement. Okay, so essentially owned media, organic, paid media is advertising. And then we have earned media, and this is essentially the traction that you gain, so your engagement, your likes, your shares that you gain from your online activities. Let's have a look at how all of these media types work together. So in order to have a comprehensive, successful strategy, you need to be able to leverage all of these media types. Your web properties, which fall under owned media and include your website, your mobile site, your blog, and social media channels, will be driven by organic marketing, such as search engine optimization and branded content, which in turn will drive your earned media, which is sharing, mentions, reposts, and reviews. And this all falls under organic marketing and contributes to brand trust, as well as online authority, which then further contributes to your search engine optimization. So you can see there's a kind of circle that's starting to happen here. And while all of that is happening, you can then propel sharing and engagement with paid promotion or advertising, such as pay-per-click or display ads, retargeting, paid influencers, content promotion, and social media ads, which all help you to gain more exposure on your web properties. And as the circle goes and as you scale up your marketing efforts, your business will grow. So we can see here earlier I talked about an omni-channel approach, right? And this is what I'm saying. All of these media types are omni-channel and we need them all to work together. But we are focusing solely on social media marketing. So now that you have a very brief and general understanding of marketing as well as traditional and digital marketing, let's break it further down and take a look at social media marketing. Let's really dive into what social media marketing is. So we can define it as the use of various techniques on social media platforms to spread brand awareness and to promote a product or service to convert a target audience into customers. Right? So let's look at the social media marketing life cycle. First of all, again, it's all about that target audience. That is so, so important. Again, looking at our definitions of marketing, it is to create a product that the customer wants, right? So knowing your target audience will also help you to know how to target them online. You then, once you have your target audience, can start looking at your marketing strategy. Now, of course, you will have to break your marketing strategy down into different segments. Maybe you want to take your overall marketing strategy and break down into traditional, and you will have to break it down into your own individual social media marketing strategy, because not all strategies are going to require the same content. Maybe not all strategies are going to target the same audience. And so you really want to try and define as much as you can in terms of your strategies for each platform. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So now that you have your marketing strategy, you then want to create content for these platforms. You want to identify the tools that you are going to use, and then you want to implement your strategy. Once you've implemented your strategy, you then need to track and measure. So how is that strategy performing? You may want to adjust your strategy or your content in order to try and see how you can improve upon what you've done. And then you want to listen online to hear what people are saying about your brand. And the circle goes on. So ultimately, it's an infinite circle of activity, and you can reach certain milestones according to the goals that you set, but then you will set new goals and restart the process. Let's take a closer look at each of these life cycle segments in more detail. So first of all, your target audience. Ultimately, this is your ideal buyer. Who is the ideal buyer of your product? Where are they located? What do they do online? Why do they do it? What content do they consume when they're online? And how does your product or service help them? All right. Then look at the marketing strategy. So developing a marketing strategy is relatively seamless once you have the key information on who your ideal buyer is. And there are 3 important aspects to keep in mind when developing a marketing strategy. So first of all, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Depending on your product or service and your target audience, there is no one solution that can be applied to all companies, to each marketing strategy, across different industries. Okay, your marketing strategy has to be completely unique to your company and your industry and who your target audience is. However, you can use and leverage existing trends into your strategy, and we are going to go into detail a bit later. It's also important to remember that your strategy is a living document, right? This means that it can and most certainly will change. Nothing is set in stone. However, it is important to remember that you also have to give your strategy enough time to be able to measure those marketing campaigns and their success. And finally, remember to work within your means. So always consider your budget as well as your resources, right? It's great to dream big, of course, but if you do not have the resources to achieve what you want to, then you're going to set yourself up for failure. So always start small and then grow from there. So what exactly is a marketing strategy? Well, your marketing strategy is ultimately your plan of action that is designed to promote and sell a product or service, right? You also are going to have a social media marketing strategy, and that will be how to promote and sell your product or service on social media specifically. But we're going to be getting into social media marketing strategies later on in this course. So the elements of a marketing strategy would be your market research. So this is about your industry and your related product or service. What is happening in your industry? Are there any product or service trends? And who are your competitors? You want to identify your target market. So these are the people who are purchasing your product or service. You want to look at your market positioning. So where are you benchmarked against your competitors? Do you hold a higher percentage? What is your industry standard? And where are you in relation to that? So what is your market share? Are people familiar with your brand? And what are you trying to achieve? You also have competitive analysis. So you want to look at why your audience would choose you over your competitor. What are your competitor's strengths and weaknesses? And can you do it better, or could you improve upon what they are doing? Remember, don't copy, but you can probably improve it. And then you want to look at your market strategy. So how do you plan to get your brand in front of interested eyes? And this obviously is linked to the strategy that you take with your marketing. And then look at your budget. So before you start planning any grandiose ideas, how much do you actually have to spend on resources as well as on advertising? So remember, you might have to pay someone to create the content, to manage your content, to report on what's going on, if you cannot do it yourself or if you don't have the time. And of course, time is a resource, okay? So if you don't have time to write a blog post a day, don't commit to doing that. You also want to identify key performance indicators. Okay, so what is it that is going to indicate whether you are succeeding in achieving your goals? And of course, reporting. How are you going to get this information, and how often do you want to get it? So let's take a quick look at a marketing strategy breakdown. So remember, as I said, your marketing strategy is the overall strategy that will determine what actions you will take to promote or sell your product or service. And it will be further broken down into detailed and more specific strategies, including, but not limited to, a digital marketing strategy. That can be further broken down into your social media marketing strategy, your email marketing strategy, your content marketing strategy. You know, in an ideal world, for an enterprise-sized company, there would be different departments managing these various tasks. All these different strategies, you know, all the different content creations, platforms, reporting, etc. However, if you are a small to medium enterprise that doesn't have, you know, a kind of department's worth of teams that you can dedicate to email marketing or social media marketing, your strategy would not likely be broken down as much as this, right? You would contain it all within your marketing strategy. keep it all short and relevant, and really only post quality content and content that is really targeted towards a specific audience with a specific goal in mind, right? So remember that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for anything. It is whatever works for your company, whatever works within your resources and your budget. Let's take a closer look at content. So we then need to identify the types of content that you would need to create for each platform. So those can be the copy that you would have, or the text that you would have, the images that you would post, or the videos that you would have to create. You want to identify what content that will be. So if you're doing copy or text, you might want to just post company updates. For your images, you might want to do product features. You might want to do some how-to videos. So identify what that content will be, right? So the type of content, what that content is, and identify how you will create that content. So what resources are at your disposal? Again, if you want to create a video, you're going to need video recording equipment, right? If you want to do an audio, or if you want to do a podcast, you're going to need mics, you're going to need editing software, you need someone who knows how to edit. So these are all considerations that you have to look at when you identify what content you will create, the type of content it's going to be, and how you create that content. And then you want to add all of this content to a planned content calendar. We're going to dive more into the content calendar later on in this module, but what you can start doing is identifying trends. So as I said earlier, you can leverage current trends to make your life a lot easier when you are creating content. But also, again, that's what the audience is asking for. That's what they're looking at. So you want to stick with those trends. But remember that with social media trends, they also need to be relevant. So you cannot try and go with a trend that doesn't fit in with your industry. Okay, remember that needs to be relevant to your brand, to your industry, to your company culture, and to how people view your brand, right? We're going to go into brand identity a little bit later on in this module, and that's also really important. Don't post something that is not in line with your brand identity. Some of these social media trends that we are seeing online currently would be images. Of course, images have always been trending. They always catch attention. People respond a lot better to images than to copy-only content. And here we can see that image content receives 94% more views than copy-only content. So I would always, even if you're doing a company update, find a relevant image to go with it, because we always get attracted by the image first. Video, so branded video content on YouTube has doubled in 3 years. So video is one of the biggest types of content that we are seeing trending. People love watching videos, as I'm sure you do too. And I definitely know that from my perspective, my video usage has definitely gone up. Then we have ephemeral content, and this is content that does not last a long time. So it has a certain time frame with which it's up. So Facebook stories, Instagram stories, and these are growing 15 times faster than feed-based sharing. So people are not really going to their feeds to scroll through anymore. Most people actually go to stories and they scroll through there. And we also have live streaming. Live streaming has specifically grown during the COVID pandemic. As people look to connect more and, being isolated, we really want a lot more connection. So live streaming is quite a big trend. And then we have influencers. So the use of influencers has been a long-standing trend. It is a little bit of a contentious issue to use influencers because people know that influencers get paid to promote a product. So you need to always make sure that with influencers, it is authentic. But 49% of consumers depend on influencer recommendations to make purchasing decisions. Okay, that's quite a big user base of users who will be influenced by an influencer. We also have Messenger and chatbots. So Messenger chatbots, it comes across as a lot more personal from a brand when you can converse with them immediately over a chat. And 47% of consumers say that they would actually purchase a product from a chatbot. So that's quite interesting. And especially with the rise of social selling, I think that this will become a much bigger trend going forward. And then we have user-generated content. So this is content that is generated by online users. So maybe your fans post a product shot of something that they received from you, use that content, share it on your site. A lot of people are more likely to trust another person's view or opinion versus a brand's post or view or opinion. And then we have interactive content. So 90% of consumers report that they want more visual and interactive content from brands. So users online actually want to connect with a brand. They want to interact, they want to find that personal connection. And I think that is really important to keep in mind when creating your social media content as well as your strategy. Another trend that you can use is employee advocacy, right? So who better to promote your brand than the people who work there? 53% of people will trust a regular employee more than the brand. 47% will trust the CEO or chief executive officer over the brand. And 65% will trust a company technical expert over the brand or any other information they hear. So use your employees to promote your product or service or your brand. So make use of your staff. Remember that they probably know 150 people on social media minimum each, right? So they have already an engaged audience. In order to achieve all of this, you need to look at the tools that you need. So this not only looks at the equipment that you would need, but also at the software. So what do you need for content creation? If you're going to create a video, then you will need a video recorder. What tools do you need to publish this content? So this would be software, right? You need Facebook to publish the content or YouTube to publish the content. What tools do you need for monitoring content performance, right? Is there any other software that you would use in order to see how this content is performing? And what tools do you need to report on this? Are there on-platform reporting tools, or would you need a third-party reporting platform? And this is where our marketing tech stack comes in. So a marketing tech stack is the grouping of technologies that are used to carry out your digital marketing efforts. And here, if we look at the marketing tech stack, we can see that there are so many available options, right? Way too many for us to just be able to go through right now. But you can see that the total solutions is 8,000. But they're all broken down into different segments, right? So all of these different tools do different things. And we're going to look at that a little bit further. So in order to help you identify what tools you need, I'm going to try and give you a little bit of direction. But first, I want to know if you have heard of another term for the marketing tech stack. Have you ever heard of a marketing tech stack before? And if so, do you know of another term? You may also have heard the term MarTech. So that is the shortened version for marketing tech stack. And you might hear people referring to MarTech. And that is essentially the grouping of technologies that you would use to carry out your marketing. Did you know that there are more than 8,000 different marketing technology solutions on the market? That is absolutely crazy. So how exactly do we identify what we would need in our tech stack? Well, you want to first identify what are your goals. And this should be in your marketing strategy or your social media marketing strategy, as well as who is your audience, right? Again, looking at software. What are they doing online? What platforms are they using, right? What content will you create? Again, what content is your audience consuming? How will you manage that content? Right? What platforms are you going to use to manage all of this? Do you need design programs to create posts? What exactly are you going to do to manage that content? And of course, again, what is your budget? I'm going to keep harping on about this. There's no use in having an extravagant marketing strategy and you cannot carry it out well. Okay, then you're just going to be creating poor quality content, and that is not going to be good for your company or brand reputation. So again, what is your budget and what are you working within? There are a lot of free platforms. Of course, the features will be reduced, but there's a lot of free platforms that you can use to get you started until you, again, grow. Once you've grown, you can then expand. So some of the things that you'd want to consider for your marketing tech stack or your business tech stack in general would be your content management system. So this is the online platform that hosts your website, blog, or landing pages, right? What content management system are you using? An example of this would be WordPress. And then you want to look at customer relationship management. So this is software that assists in tracking how your marketing efforts impact your sales pipeline. And again, we can see how this is important because our ultimate goal is to sell our service or product. And an example of this would be Salesforce. Then we also have to look at search engine optimization. So this is the technique to optimize your website to appear higher in search engine results pages. And there are a lot of softwares that allow you and help you to do this. Example of this would be Ahrefs. Of course, social media, and this is the use of social media platforms to publish content, monitor social conversations, and curate content. But you also need a management platform, and a good example of this would be Sprout Social. Then you want to consider your advertising, so the use of paid tactics to promote your product or service. An example would be Google Ads, as well as email, and this is the use of email to market your product or service at a low cost. An example of this would be MailChimp, where you can have up to 2,000 free emails per month. You might also want to look at some collaboration tools. So these are tools that assist with working more efficiently between teams. So again, particularly if you have a big team, if you are a enterprise level company, then you would want to look at something like CoSchedule. When you have different teams managing different segments of your marketing, you really want to make sure that everyone is collaborating with the same message and content is going out. And then you want to look at any analysis and reporting tools. So these are tools that enable you to analyze and report on your marketing performance. So those are a roundup of the tools that you would use. So how exactly do we identify what is required? And again, here is where our marketing strategy comes into play. Right. So once you know your target audience, you know what platforms they're on, what content they consume, the rest of the answers will follow quite easily. The next step, of course, would be to then implement all of this. So you want to follow the plan laid out in your marketing strategy and create and post content according to your content calendar. All of this content you then need to track and measure. So again, for each of these, you want to identify key performance indicators. That's going to help you to identify the success of that content. You want to conduct monthly reports and analyze the data. Let's take a quick look at some marketing jargon. So your key performance indicator. This is a type of performance measurement used to quantifiably measure performance for a set objective. And remember that these all have to align with your overall business goals. So as a business, what are you trying to achieve, and how can these various strategies help you to achieve that? And then once you've got your data, you're measuring, you're reporting on it, you then want to adjust your strategy. So you need to then change elements of your strategy that are not performing well, using the data to drive decisions on how to change that content. And remember, it is so vital that you give your strategy enough time to take effect. Long-term strategy decisions are best made with more data, but you should be able to easily identify content that is not resonating with your audience. So adjust one element and see if there is a difference in your metrics. We are going to be learning more about something called A/B split testing, and that is where you test the same content but change different elements and see how that performs. And then you want to listen. So this is when you monitor online conversations around your brand, product, service, and industry. So it does obviously go with measuring, but you need to listen to, if you change content or if you change something, is there a change in response? So it's important to always be listening before and after any changes. And you also want to monitor conversations around your industry. Maybe you can contribute really useful information, position yourself as a thought leader. You always want to know what is going on and be at the forefront of changes in your industry. And then you want to manage online conversations through participation. So you really want to ensure that you are participating with online users, particularly those who are following your page, who engage with your content. Give them something back and build personal relationships. And then, of course, you want to repeat everything again from the start. But that brings us to the end of our lesson. But before we finish up, I'd like to ask you some rapid question rounds to see how much of that information you retained. Let's take a look at what our questions are. So really quickly, you can grab a pen and a paper if you want, or put them down in your head, wherever is best, or shout the answer out if that's what is suitable. But the first question is, what is the abbreviated term for the marketing tech stack technologies? Number 2, what is the plan of action called that promotes your products or services? Number 3, what is the process of increasing the quantity and quality of organic traffic to a website? Number 4, what is it called when you work out the ratio between net profit and the cost of investment? And number 5, what is the process of increasing a website's visibility in search engine results pages through paid advertising? So I'm looking for a word. The first word is the marketing tech stack technologies. The second is the plan of action called that promotes the product or service. The process of increasing the quantity and quality of organic traffic to a website. The ratio between net profit and the cost of investment. And the process of increasing a website's visibility in search engine results pages through paid advertising. That is key. Do you think you have all the answers? Let's have a look. So the first one is MarTech. That is the shortened abbreviation or term for marketing technologies. The second one is the marketing strategy. So that is your plan of action. The third one is search engine optimization. And this is the increasing traffic to your website through organic means. Return on investment, that is how much you get back on your investment spend. And we have search engine marketing, that is promoting your product or service through paid means online. Congratulations if you got all of them correct. If not, don't worry, it's just the first lesson and there will always be time to learn more. In this lesson, we learned what marketing is, we learned how social media marketing fits into marketing, and we broke down the social media marketing lifecycle, as well as delved into more information about each of those sections. But there is so much more to come, and this journey is a really exciting one. So I will see you at the next lesson.